Greetings, Andy here again, and this video is part one for February of my new releases that I bought during February. Now February's been a bit of a cracker. I've got 12 new records to talk about. Yes, 12. So I'm splitting them into two parts. I'm going to do 6 now. And then 6 in a week or so. Of those 12, 4 are not new releases this month, but are sort of recent releases. 3 from 2025 late on that I've just picked up, and one actually from 2024, which I belatedly discovered. So I'm gonna cover 4 new ones now, plus 2 of those recent releases, which are connected, and then the same again from in the next video. And I'm going to start with a bit of prog, and this is probably the big one of the month, and of course I am talking about Big Train and their new album Woodcut. So and this is quite a departure for Big Train in lots of ways, which I'll go through, but this is a concept album, and not only a concept album, it's a narrative concept album, and by that I mean it's basically a story. So narrative concept albums, like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is a classic one. Tommy, they're basically telling a story. They've got a start, middle and end. And this one, called Woodcut, is about, it's about, it's called, who they call the artist on here is basically a woodcutter. And they got the idea of this from visiting a museum in Oslo. It was in Norway, I think it was in Oslo, looking at a piece of woodcutting from there. And the guy who got the idea of this is the lead singer, sort of late lead singer, Alberto Brevin. So Bravin or Bravin, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. So Alberto basically replaced the long lead singer who died in 2020 or 2021, I'm not sure which. Alberto is basically Italian, and he came from the venerable Italian prog band PFM. No, I'm not going to try and say that. As I say, David Longdon was the long-term singer who died in 2020 or 2021. And it's interesting, I think, for such a band which is so sort of quintessentially English, is very international. And I was looking through their current lineup, and you've got Alberto, the lead vocals, who I'll come back to because he's all over this album, is Italian. Gregory Sporton, one of the founders, actually originally from Sutton Coldfield in Birmingham. Nick DeVirgilio is the drummer. Now he's American, originally in Spock's Beard, going back. Now I'm venturing to Scandinavia, and I'm going to mangle the names with apologies. Rikard Sjöblom is the guitarist. He's from Sweden, or the lead guitarist. So they're all pretty well multi-instrumentalists, to be honest. Then you've got Claire Lindley, who's the violinist, and I'll come back to her. She's English. Oscar Holdorf, keyboards, is Norwegian. Paul Mitchell, trumpet on here. I think he's a sort of new addition, England. And another new addition, Brian Hulse on cello, who I think is American, but I'm not sure. So back to Alberto Bravin. So this is the second album that he's appeared on since joining Big Train, but he's gradually taking more and more of a lead. So it was his idea to do Woodcut, and he basically produced it and compiled it. So whilst all of the, not all of the band, but most of the band had some sort of input into, into either individual tracks or or sort of, you know, combining. So, for example, Gregory Sport and Bravin did a lot of co-writing. Bravin pulled the whole thing together and produced it, and it's sort of different. It's a real evolution from Big Train's sort of earlier, sort of very 70s feel. This has a, you know, whilst it still has its feet in 70s prog, you can't get away from that. It sounds more up to date. It's a bit, you know, a bit more like Marillion than Genesis, I would say, though not like either. They are themselves. And, you know, there's such a variety of it. This is a, you know, like any narrative concept album, you need to sort of sit down and listen to the whole thing. Each track is part of the whole story. So, you know, yes, you can listen to one side and then the next and then, but you're not going to flit around between tracks. And you know, it's a full double LP. I mean, some people have considered, I always have a look at sort of reviews before I do these. So, you know, it's been called a masterpiece. It's got, you know, the production values, which I sort of noticed as being much crisper and precise maybe than previous albums. You know, it's sort of more, it's quite intense in a lot of ways, but it's very solid. Quick look through some of the tracks. So, the second track, which is called, well, the first track actually I won't go into, it's called Inkwell Black, which I think is interesting because the vinyl, which is black vinyl, they've called Inkwell Black. So not any old black vinyl, but Inkwell Black vinyl. I can't see the difference. So the artist is the first of the sort of introduction of the main part of the album, and the artist is the subject of the story, and it follows his descent into a sort of dreamlike world after he discovers a piece of heartwood. Not sure if I know what heartwood is, you know, and it follows that through until the very end, the last track, which is called The Last Stand, which is really epic. It's a real epic close, and I'll do a bit of a sample on that one. So quick look through the tracks then. So as I say, the artist, then it goes on to, well, it goes through lots of tracks, and some are instrumental, some are quite short, some are quite long. You know, there's great variety in here. It never gets dull, you know, so the side B opens with Albion Press, which has some great guitar work by Richard Schaublom. It's got driving drums and bass and a really nice chorus. Where are we? Oh, the closing of side. I've got these all out of order. Closing of side one is The Sharpest Blade, which has some lovely vocal harmonies between Bravin and Claire Linley, the violinist, who is much more to the fore on this album than previous ones. She's also been much more heavily involved in the songwriting. It almost has a slight sort of Irish jig feel to it at the beginning, but only slight, and then it morphs into quite a heavy end. So it's an unusual track. Warp and Weft is one I really like. Where's that? That closes on side B, which has an unusual time signature. I don't quite understand it, but it's a little bit weird in feel, but it's a sort of slow builder, you know, it feels like it's quite technical. I'm not a very technical. I don't understand technical, to be honest with you, because I'm not a musician. But it feels very precise. And as I said, that Last Stand is really epic. It's got towering guitars and a great chorus. As I say, it's very much in Inkwell Black. And second album, brand new release, is I love the name. I love the name of the band, which is very bonkers, and even more so the name of this album. And the album is called Air, URGH, and it's by a band called Mandy, Indiana, who, despite the name, well, I should say based in Manchester. They're actually an Anglo-French band, so the singer is French and sings in French, but they're essentially a British band. And they basically the name is a play on Gary, Indiana, you know, an actual town in Indiana. But they've sort of changed the name from a common boy's name to a common girl's name. Now, if you're called Mandy or Gary, by common I just mean not unusual. So just to be clear on that one. So this is really good. So it's their second album. I didn't buy the first one. I heard bits of it and quite liked it. So, but this is a step on. Quite often, you know, with a second, you know, they can be difficult second albums, but quite often I think they are, you know, they've learnt from their first one and moved on, and that's the case here. And this is really in your face stuff. It's sort of, you know, post-punk-ish. It's a whole mix of stuff really, but it's quite hard hitting. It's quite heavy, and as I say, the singer, who is called Valentine Caulfield, who is French, you know, based in Manchester. You know, all bar the last track are sung in French, but with such energy. So even though I haven't got a clue what she's singing about, and a lot of it's sort of about, you know, different modern stuff and sort of, you know, attacks on, you know, political stuff and so on. But I don't know what she's singing about. But I love her voice, and it's really hard going. It's really not hard going. It's really hard hitting. It's real sort of, you know, it's atmospheric. It's fast. It's a barrage of noise. I know that's not my term. I read that one and thought, yeah, that sums it up. Chaos and catharsis, which Rolling Stone in the UK version gave it a 5 out of 5, calling it a barrage of noise that requires the listener to fully submit to find the beauty within. So there you go. You know, and it's sort of visceral, really, in a way. I think that's a good regard. It's just completely relentless. It never stops, and it's quite you know, it's not just sort of indie guitar rock. It's quite sort of, you know, it's quite in the disco as well, but not disco, more sort of more housey, but heavy. Like it's a whole mix of stuff. You've got industrial sort of rock in there. There's a bit of techno. There's some. If I say rap, that's a bit of a stretch, but it was written bizarrely, and while two of the band were suffering from, you know, considerable health issues. So the singer Valentine was dealing with some sort of health condition which resulted in her becoming temporarily, thankfully, blind in one eye, and I think the drummer was ill as well. Anyway, they got their act together, you know, recovered enough to produce this absolutely amazing, heavy post-punky. I mean, this is the stuff. If you like punk, particularly female-led punk, then you'll like this. You know, there is a rapper on there. Billy Woods appears on a track called Sicko, which is quite appropriate from the rest of it. My favourite track, which I do a bit of a sample, is called Cursive, you know, which is a real banger. It's sort of, you know, you can imagine that in a club. You know, you'd be headbanging and pogoing to it. My knees, I have a meniscus tear, so my pogoing days, shape, age, are probably behind me. And as I say, the last track, I'll Ask Her, is the only one which is sung in English. And one of these days, by the time I get there, I need to actually slow down and listen to it a little bit. So, you know, brilliant record, and it's very resplendent on red.
Et mes rêves refusent d'être tenus en laisse. J'avance à reculons vers des mondes que j'invente. Mes pas sur les pavés prouvent que je suis vivante. Je danse en attendant que le monde disparaisse. Et mes rêves refusent d'être tenus en laisse. J'avance à reculons vers des mondes que j'invente. Mes pas sur les pavés prouvent que je suis vivante.
Now, a complete change in tone. We're now the next two records are the two sort of slightly later finds, and the first of them is one I sort of came across slightly by accident, and I'm going to relate a little bit of a story around these. So, both of these albums are a sort of, they're Americana, but a very sort of English UK take on them, and the first of which is sort of almost the latest in my journey through you know, of discovery in Americana. I'm going to start with right at the beginning, if you just bear with me. Back in the turn of the millennium, I bought, I think it was 2001, I bought a CD, compilation CD, that's it, of various records. I can't remember what it was called, but one of the songs on there was a song called Nobody's Song in Particular by a band called Grand Drive. And there were lots of famous tracks on this compilation. This one was completely not famous, and it was the best one on there. I absolutely loved it, and I do to this day. And it's called Nobody's Song in Particular. And as I say, it was by a band called Grand Drive, and I liked it so much. I went out and bought the CD, you know, that it came from. I don't know if, I'm not sure this has ever been produced on vinyl. And it's, as I say, it's Grand Drive, and this is True Love and High Adventure. And when I got this, it was a shock, because at the time I got no idea what Americana was. I listened to this and thought, it's country. I don't like country. And I listened to it more and more and thought, I really, really like that. And it was my first foray into what actually I discovered was Americana, albeit a very British take on it. Now, I say British because, you know, we're slight sort of literally, but not. So Grand Drive were essentially, I mean, it was a trio, but it was made up, the leaders of it were two brothers called Danny and Julian Wilson. And Danny was the singer and guitarist, and Julian was essentially pianist. I think it was more piano than keyboards generally, and a drummer whose name I've forgotten. It's not on the back, so I can't read it. But Danny and Julian were actually born in Australia, but grew up, so they came to the UK as kids and grew up in South London in the sort of Croydon area, actually. Specifically, if you come from there, Sutton, which is sort of next door to Croydon. They produced another couple of albums after this, and then I think Julian was less interested than Danny, and Danny basically went off on his own and has effectively been the grandfather, the godfather of UK Americana for the last 25 years. And the album I came across, this was actually released in 2024, and it passed me by at the time, and it's Danny and the Champions of the World, and it's called You Are Not a Stranger Here. Now, I've got a few albums. So Danny George Wilson, to give him his full name, has produced several albums with his sort of revolving band, the Champions of the World. But he also produces solo albums in the name Danny George Wilson, and I've got a few of each. And I got wind that he was producing a solo album in the next month or two. So I went online thinking, well, I might pre-order that. Only to discover this had come out late in 2024. And I thought, oh, I missed that. And I streamed a couple of tracks and I thought, that is absolutely brilliant. So I've bought it and I've played it a lot of times over the last month. And this would have been definitely, had I got it at the time, would have been in my top 5 in 2024. And if I look at the whole of 2024 and 2025, it would have appeared in my top 10 somewhere. I like it that much. And there's Danny now, as I say, he's now in his 50s, and I don't know, 50s, early, late, whatever, I don't know. He's getting on a bit now, not as old as me. And it is, it's difficult to describe really. It's Americana, but it's quite gentle. It's a move on from his earlier stuff. It's sort of, it's very warm and positive, and it's sort of reflective. He's singing about getting older, basically. Something I understand. About disappointments and so on. It's got lots of different styles in here. I mean, essentially the Americana runs through it, but there's the odd nod to jazz here and there, slightly ambient in one. And I read a review here, and I'm not sure I agree with this, but I thought it was an interesting description. Sort of that the sound is like a mix of the War on Drugs, Wilco, and the Blue Nile. Not sure I entirely get that, but I can see that here and there are nods to each of those, and it's very he's singing from the heart. You can tell that, and I think this is their 7th album, so they've got a few, and I've got about 3 of them, I think. So I think, to be fair, they're a mix of quality on there. It's like, my favourite track on here is the second one, which is called Kicking Tires. I'll do a bit of a sample of that, which is 9 minutes long. And it's got a sort of, it's quite an atmospheric sort of rumination even. It's just sort of like very relaxing. But there's some great guitar in here. Danny himself is actually quite a good guitarist. But on here you've got naturally Americana. You've got some slide guitar, steel guitar. You've got, some of them are quite anthemic in a way, but not in a big sense. The closer aside one is called I'm in Love, which is another favourite. It's got almost a hypnotic melody and some lovely guitar lines in there. So I really, really like this one, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully won't be disappointed because I've pre-ordered. I think it's March. Is it the March or May? I can't remember which. His new solo album under his own name. And I'm going to come back to this album in a minute because there's some connection to the next one. And this was just basically just a lovely clear vinyl, transparent vinyl. The next record is connected to the previous one, and I'll come to that. I picked up from watching Rob Walker on a recent video, and he talked about this, and the way he described it was, I really, really need to check that out. And it's an album by, so this came out late in 2025, so it's only about sort of 3 or 4 months old, but I've just discovered it from Rob, so thanks Rob, you're watching this. And it's the Dreaming Spires and their album Normal Town. And this is another concept album, but this isn't a narrative one, so it's not a story, it's a thematic concept album, and it's about, I think, their hometown. So Dreaming Spires is obviously a reference to Oxford, so, you know, often called the Dreaming Spires, with the churches and the colleges there. So they come from Oxfordshire, but I think they actually come from Didcot. And this album is, you know, a thematic concept about the town of Didcot, which is sort of south of Oxford, rough, you know, loosely between Oxford and Reading. Here we go. The album is centred specifically on Didcot, Oxfordshire, which was famously identified in a 2017 statistical study as the most normal town in England, which I thought was interesting. And by normal, I think what it really means is typical. So Didcot is a medium-sized town. Once upon it was a railway town. You know, that was its main industry. It was a hub of the railways and manufacturing and stuff. And it also had a huge power station next to it, which is closed down. And basically, this they sing of its shift from, you know, particularly the transition from the industry, it all closing down and being demolished, to becoming a typical sort of, you know, where the industry is light industry on industrial estates around the outside, and bypasses, and in the boredom of small town with nothing to do, so getting into trouble. There's a track called Stolen Car, which I quite like, where one of their mates stole a car and got into trouble. You know, needless to say. So I'll play a sample of that. But it is, I mean, it opens with a track called Normal Town. It talks about normalisation. So it's really a transition from being that industry to new and what it's like now. So it ends on one called Real Life. You know, and there's a track called Cooling Towers, which is all about, you know, after the power station closed down, the demolition of the big cooling towers on there. 21st century light industrial. So, and apparently some of the band actually worked on those industrial estates at different times. You know, it's essentially it's quite hopeful. You know, it's not sort of you know, being morbid about the change. It's accepting of change. And it moving on, and I think one of the interesting things is, I said I'd come to the previous album, but the leaders of this band, it's actually a 5-piece, but there are two brothers who really lead it. They're the vocals, bass, and keyboards essentially. It is Robin Bennett and Joe Bennett, and interestingly, Joe and Robin are also part of the Champions of the World, so they're on this album as well, which I thought was quite interesting. You know, like I looked at, so they've got quite a bit of jangly guitar going on in there. I thought I read one review which I thought was quite interesting, which gave it a sort of comparison, not so much in sound, but sort of the whimsical Englishness and sort of nostalgia of the Kinks Village Green Preservation Society. So it doesn't sound anything like that, obviously, but I sort of get that. It's a nice record. It's just on plain black.
Song is the blues. Walk along in my shoes. I've got a worn out soul, but I'm still on my feet. Give me that rock and roll. I wanna feel my heartbeat. Let the sirens wail.
So, and I mentioned in when I did my January roundup that there was no Fuzz Club album in January, and a bit like Buses, then two suddenly turn up. So very early in the month, I got a package from Fuzz Club with two records in it. So the first of which was, so two albums of the month in February and none in January. The first of which is called Golden Hours. Beyond Wires, and this is a cracker. This is really good, and I'm gonna read the hype sticker because they all because that sums it up quite well, and it says Golden Hours is an outfit of seasoned players who have performed as part of Gang of Four, Brian Jonestown Massacre, Tricky, Fuzztones, and more. Sounding like a thunderous post-punk avalanche with very psych leanings, or a well-aimed punch in the gut. The band returns with their second album, Beyond Wire, coated in fuzz and ghostly atmospherics with strong melodic undercurrents. It was written and recorded between Berlin rehearsal rooms and an old mansion in Brussels, bleeding noisy electric static into every song. So yeah, it's a cracker. So Helicon, Eyal Steinson, vocals and guitar, Wim Jensen's vocals and bass, Tobias Humble drums, and Rodrigo Pallavicino is also on guitar. So the vocals, so Helicon and Vim alternate the vocals, so each track is alternated, but it doesn't actually say who's doing which. So whilst I know they're alternating, I don't know which is which. And so one of the tracks on here, The Letter, I think is Vim, but I don't know for sure. Quite ominous in a way. It's got that sort of, it's driving and sort of uplifting, but the baritone vocals are of, I think, Vim, but not 100% sure, are reminiscent to me of Tom Smith of Editors, but with a much more fuzzy, psyche sort of music going on in the background. A bit of garage rock in there as well, and it's sort of noisy. It's rough. It's ready, and it's just really good. And when I do the samples, their current, when you sort of online, the picture that they're doing looks like it's a prison photo, but I'll put it up there to show you. This is a cracker. It's quite varied. They're not all the same, needless to say, because they've got two singers, each of which are the songwriters. So it's a songwriting pair, but they each write their own, and there are some differences to them, but they go really well together. And the sort of soundscape of this is really taken from this sort of like ramshackle sort of building in Belgium, which they recorded it in, has affected it. And as ever with I also ought to say it's a, what number is it? 169 out of 350. Can you see that? And it's Orange Marbly Affair. And the last album on this is the other Fuzz Club one, and it is Helicon X Our Lover, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And it's called Arise. Now this is a real, this is a collaboration effectively. So Helicon are a Glasgow sort of psych band, and Our Lover is apparently an LA producer. And so it's a real sort of mix. So you've got, you've got fuzzed out, typical sort of psych heavy, fuzzed out guitars. But Our Lover is much more sort of trip hop and you know, hypnotic, and somehow the two go really well together. You don't feel like it's this sort of strange mixture. You've got sort of like you've got those sort of fuzzy guitars, but you've also got sort of sitars and sort of an Eastern feel to it. It's really quite unusual, but very good. Here and there's a little bit of, and maybe this is where the mix comes in, just a very slight sort of krautrock feel to it. Not over, it's just a slight feel. And I've read, so when I had a quick look through the reviews, so I sort of see this, but I would never have said it. It is a slight feel of Screamadelica in the sort of fusions of styles and genres going on. It's produced by Tony Dugan, who's a Glasgow producer that's produced Mogwai and Jesus and Mary Chain, and you know, so he produces heavy stuff. But it's really quite dense, but very clear as well. And if you know, I'll do a bit of the title track on here, "Arise," which kicks off the album, because it's really unusual. So it's got sort of, you know, it somehow has Eastern feel to it with zithers and sitars, but on the other hand, going all the way through it at the same time is a sort of an electro beat. It really introduces the two sort of the collaboration between the two in a really good way. And Backbreaker is another one. Again, it's got sort of Eastern strings feel to it, but it's got sort of like, you know, a really good soul-like bass line to it. And Adjust the Dosage is quite calm and you know, after the sort of like the heaviness, it just sort of smooths things over. So another great album. Let me read the hype sticker. Glasgow psych rock band Helicon and Los Angeles-based producer and DJ Al Lover have joined forces on new collaborative album Arise, delivering a maximalist, uplifting sound with a baggy, hypnotic pulse. Helicon's Eastern-influenced psychedelia is infused with Lover's genre-bending electronics. Produced by Tony Dugan at Castle of Doom Studios in Glasgow, the result is a dense, hypnotic and fiercely rhythmic record that layers trip-hop breaks, deep low end and dub textures. I couldn't have put it better myself. This one is in blue, and it's another, what number is it? 78 out of 500. There we go. So next time, I've got another prog album. I've got two interesting 2025 finds, both of which were recommendations, or one from a long-standing subscriber, and let me say a good friend from the VC, and then four other brand new ones, which I think are really interesting. So thanks for watching. Come back next time. Cheers.